Hello book lovers and welcome to Book Talk Radio Club. My name is Claire Harris and today I'm talking to author John Stedman. John is the author of The Language Secret, How to Learn a Foreign Language or How to Speak 10 Languages Badly. John speaks 10 languages but he never went to university, to the disappointment and disgust of his begowned and mortarboard wearing masters at the highly traditional Chatham House Grammar School. Like most English school children, he never learned the grammar of his own language. In fact, he was not absolutely sure what grammar was, even though he was at a grammar school. Strange. John somehow ended up teaching English in Paris to graduates of the École Nationale Administration, where many presidents of France were educated. 15 years spent as a linguist and lexicographer in various African countries produced a fascination with the phenomenon of multilingualism. Now living in Germany, John and his wife Sharon specialise in teaching accelerated language learning techniques. Hello John, first of all welcome and thank you for coming to talk to me on Book Talk Radio Club.
Thank you very much, Claire. It's really nice of you to have me.
It's my pleasure and I'm quite surprised I didn't get tongue-tied and trip over all that lot. John, you're fascinated by languages and you specialise in teaching accelerated language learning with your wife Sharon. But what was the decision behind writing and publishing your book?
Well, we thought there must be other people like us. Both of us grew up in a small seaside town, completely monocultural, very white town at the time we grew up. I didn't see anyone with a different skin colour until I was in my teens. I wasn't especially good at school. And my experience of learning languages at school was disappointing. As you mentioned, I didn't go to university. And then suddenly, here we find ourselves quite a few decades later, and we speak a lot of languages. So we thought there must be other people who would like to know languages, who perhaps have had disappointing results at school, who are intimidated by the whole process. And we wanted really to tell them that it is possible. Can learn languages and how you can do that.
The Language Secret, How to Learn a Foreign Language or How to Speak 10 Languages Badly. Okay, please explain the title, John.
Well, there are two bits to that. The second bit first, how to speak 10 languages badly. It's a very simple concept, but quite profound really. When you think about it, if you want to speak a language well, there's no bypassing the step. You first have to speak it badly. Children, when they learn a language, speak it badly. All of us have to speak it badly. And unfortunately, perfectionism in schools, the fact that you have to take exams, even with language apps, you can't go on to one question until you've got the previous one right.
Yeah.
All of that encourages an idea that you've got to speak it perfectly. But in fact, it's perfectly possible to speak badly and still be able to communicate. Many of us, for example, if we ask a question, a foreigner, say, how long have you been in England? You're likely to get a reply something like, well, I'm there since 6 years. When you think about it, there's actually 3 grammatical mistakes in that sentence.
Absolutely.
I'm there since 6 years. But who cares? We don't care. We got the information. So speaking a language badly is the first step to speaking it well. The other part for the title is it's a secret. There is a secret, something a lot of people don't know about, and it's the concept of language families and sound shifts. Both of those sound very technical terms, but if we know about them, it has a very, very practical application to help us learn faster, but maybe we'll speak about that a bit later.
You spent 15 years as a linguist and lexicographer in various African countries, which produced a fascination with the phenomenon of multilingualism. Most people in the sub-Saharan region speak at least 3 languages. How can that be with such limited access to formal education? So what's the answer?
Well, it is astonishing. When you do go to Africa, 3 languages is virtually the minimum. Most people speak 4, 5, 6. It's not uncommon for people to speak 10 or more. Really,
Wow.
That's not uncommon. And it's going back to the 2 things we said earlier. First of all, these people are prepared to speak badly. They're not worried about being perfect. They just want to get the point across. They want to be able to express themselves. And they've got no hang-ups, no complexes about that.
Mm.
And the other thing is what we mentioned, language families. In sub-Saharan Africa, most languages belong to the Bantu language family.
Right.
Now, they're very, very different, but they all have a similar way of putting things together. And subconsciously, without ever having studied it, most of the people there, they realize that in their own language, there's a certain logic to expressing themselves, and that same logic applies across other members of the language family. So the two things, being prepared to speak badly, knowing something about language families, and it's phenomenal how many of these people speak so many languages, and some of them can't even read.
Let's talk about some of the chapters in The Learning Secret. I must say the title of this one really intrigued me, The Birmingham Screwdriver. What's that all about? What have Brummie screwdrivers got to do with learning a language? Are we talking a tool here or a cocktail?
Yeah, I wish it was a cocktail. I could do with one now. Actually, you probably know it's an expression. It's very unfair on the people of Birmingham, which is a lovely city and they're lovely people. A Birmingham screwdriver is, in fact, a hammer.
I've never heard of that. No, I've never heard of that one.
Really? No, it's quite a common expression, a Birmingham screwdriver. So what that means is, of course, that you can't turn a screw with a hammer.
Mm-hmm.
And so the point of this chapter is that we don't think about it very often. We say, I'd like to learn a language. And then we start and we realize that the things you need, the tools you need for writing a language are totally different from the tools that you need to understand a language.
Mm.
So we go in with this blanket approach, right? I'm going to learn a language, and we don't even think about the different tools we need for reading, writing, speaking, and hearing. So that's what the chapter is about. First of all, before you even start learning a language, you've got to think, well, it's like building a house. What are the tools that I need to build this house, to build this structure? We need to have an overview about what makes any language different from English. And because most of us, I know I didn't, never studied English, our own language, really in school, we don't really have any idea about how a language is structured. And so the Birmingham Screwdriver is all about equipping us with the right tools for the job. How many words do we need, for example, to learn?
Interesting.
Grammar. What is grammar? How much of it do we need? All of these questions we need to get straight before we even start.
Paranoid Android, in which a bored supercomputer helps us to examine your brain. Am I by any chance speaking to a fellow fan of Douglas Adams and his wonderful Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books?
You are. Hitchhikers Guide to the Galaxy is a wonderful book. In fact, another chapter, the following chapter, speaks about another invention of Douglas Adams, the babblefish.
Oh, yeah.
He had this wonderful idea that you could stick a babblefish in your ear and miraculously you would be able to understand any other language.
I remember that. I love the fact that you've included humour in your book, and it's not just another dry old tome about how to learn a language. Humour is so important in teaching, don't you think?
It is. It's absolutely essential. We learn much more quickly when we're having fun. We should be able to laugh. One of the reasons, in fact, when you study things, women often are much better linguists than men are.
Oh, right.
And yeah, very often, of course there are exceptions.
Sure.
And one of the reasons for that is women, again, it's just a general observation, take themselves a lot less seriously than men do. We men we stand very much on our dignity, and we don't like people laughing at us very much. And humour really is the ability to laugh at oneself. When you speak a language, you're inevitably going to make a lot of mistakes. You're going to sometimes make people laugh. And taking that element of humour and using it to learn is a very, very powerful tool indeed.
You have two separate chapters, each covering the Germanic languages and the Romance languages. That's interesting. Do tell.
Okay, a lot of people, if you ask them, well, where does English come from? Where does English fit in to all the languages of Europe? Most people would probably say, well, English is derived from Latin. And in fact, that's not true. English is a German language. And if you take all the basic words, family relationships, for example, brother, sister, mother, father, parts of the body, hand, foot, nose, common things in nature, garden, all of these words are German. We don't realise that. So when we say Germanic languages, what we're talking about is German, Dutch, Norwegian, Danish, languages like that.
Yeah.
So we have, as English speakers, we have a head start. We can learn all of these languages very quickly because all the basic words in those languages are the same as English ones.
Yeah.
Now, the Romance languages, what we mean by that is languages like French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian. Because of an accident of history, something that happened in 1066, the Norman invasion, English absorbed huge quantities of French and Latin words.
Yep.
So it means that we also have access to languages like French and Italian. We can learn all the Germanic languages very quickly and all the Romance languages very quickly if we're prepared to know something about how the history of the languages worked. So English is in a unique position. And those two chapters, they just give a brief overview how we can learn 3 or 4 Germanic languages, or 3 or 4 Romance languages all at once.
Wackford Squares, in which we ponder if we really need to learn languages anymore and where we went wrong in school. John, first of all, I think you better explain Wackford Squares for those unfamiliar with Charles Dickens' novels.
Well, I'm a great fan of Charles Dickens. Wackford Squares was a character in Nicholas Nickleby. Nicholas Nickleby was a very idealistic young teacher, and he got a job at a boarding school, and the headmaster was this chap called Wackford Squares. So like most Dickens characters, he's a bit of a caricature. He's an evil man, and the Wackford bit refers to the fact that he would whack his students with a cane at every opportunity. And one of the things he would do while he was whacking them was recite grammar. He would say, I whack, I beat, first person singular, indicative, present tense. Now, the reason that I mention that is that's the way grammar was taught in schools until quite recently. It's something called parsing. You'd have to take apart every bit of the sentence and decide whether it's an adjective or a noun or a verb.
Yeah.
Unsurprisingly, most people, that was the biggest turn-off you can imagine.
I wonder why.
Yeah, it's absolutely boring as anything. And so people never, ever learn languages. Most people studied perhaps French 5 years at school and can barely communicate.
Yeah.
Now, what has happened is people have gone to the other extreme now. I have a nephew, and he got O-level GCSE in German. And the poor lad, he can't say a word because the testing now is multiple choice, and you really don't have to know any German to get GCSE in German. So the chapter about Wackford Squares is examining how languages are taught at school and maybe what we can do to improve things and make it more enjoyable and get better results.
So where did we go wrong when teaching languages in school? What would you think to include humour and no, tell me.
Yeah, well, I do. The first thing I would do is never ever make it a compulsory subject.
Yeah.
Kids, if they don't want to learn French or Spanish or German or Chinese, don't make them. Because kids decide pretty early in school what they think is going to be useful. So only take children that want to learn the language. Then make it fun. Then do away with exams. That's a big radical position, but exams in languages are really not worth the paper they're written on. I got O-levels in French and German. I couldn't speak a word. My nephew has GCSE, he can't speak a word. There's an English exam that they use abroad called TOEIC. It's a Cambridge evaluation. I knew many high-level executives in France that got almost full marks on that exam, and they couldn't communicate. So language teaching in school should not be about exams.
Yeah.
It should be about communicating,
Absolutely.
having fun, using the language, not being perfectionist.
And that's, after all, that's why you need to be able to speak another language, to communicate with people, to converse.
That's the whole point. Language is about communication. It's not about marks on a piece of paper.
Exactly.
As we saw earlier, many people speak what is grammatically incorrect English, but they can communicate, and that's the main thing.
Let's talk a little bit now about John Stedman. You speak 10 languages, which is impressive, but you never went to university, to the disappointment and disgust of your begowned and mortarboard-wearing masters at the highly traditional Chatham House Grammar School. This school is apparently modelled on Eton and has some famous old boys. Would you like to share? I mean, one of them was a former British Prime Minister. It made me laugh what you put in your book, so do please share that.
Well, there are two famous old boys that went to Chatham House. One was Edward Heath, who was Prime Minister in 1970. He could actually speak French, but he had the most horrendous English accent. But at least he did make an effort. The other one was Frank Muir. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, of course I do.
A program on British television called Call My Bluff.
That's right.
And he had this extremely plummy
accent.
But like me, he was just a boy from the Isle of Thanet. Chatham House is in Ramsgate. But it was a grammar school. Now, even years later, I thought, why was it called a grammar school? Because I never learnt any grammar. I didn't really know what grammar was. But apparently originally, a grammar school was a place where students, working class students, could learn Latin and Greek and the grammar of those languages. But
right.
I never did.
That's interesting. I never knew that either. You somehow ended up teaching English in Paris to graduates of the, and here we go, I'm going to try this one, of the École Nationale d'Administration, where many presidents of France were educated. How? 2 language O-levels and no university education. By the way, I hope my French accent isn't too abysmal. I always feel like I'm channeling Inspector Clouseau asking for a room. I noticed you also cover accents in one of the chapters of your books.
No, your accent was pretty good, Claire. Pretty good indeed.
Well, thank you. My accent's good, but I can't speak French to save my life.
There's 2 things there. If you get a book on learning French, the first maybe 20 pages or something will be about how to get a decent accent, and it's desperately intimidating. They'll explain the phonetics where you have to put your nose and your tongue and your mouth, and they will speak about nasal vowels and rounded vowels.
So true.
If you can just mimic Inspector Clouseau, you can do without those 20 pages and probably make a better job of the accent. We did end up in Paris. The one thing that went in our favour was, unlike a lot of English teachers who live in Paris, by this time we could speak really good French.
Right.
A lot of English people abroad, there are great enclaves in the Costa del Sol and in the French Riviera of English people that have never got beyond the very, very basics language in the country in which they live. But if you can speak a foreign language as an English person, you can get a job anywhere. And it gives you a huge amount of credibility when you're teaching a language, because the student knows that you yourself have been through the process and you've succeeded in it.
Right. You spent 15 years as a linguist and lexicographer in various African countries, which, as I've said before, produced a fascination with the phenomenon of multilingualism. That must have been very interesting. What did it involve?
Lexicographer, for those that don't know, and I didn't used to, it just means a person that compiles a dictionary. The languages that we were dealing with didn't have any dictionaries. So, in fact, when we first came back to Europe about a year ago, we actually published, Sharon and I, a Lingala dictionary. It's French Lingala, so that's published. And while we were in Africa, we had to find the vocabulary, all the words in a language, and decide what a word was. That seems a strange thing to say, but if a language has never been written down,
Yeah.
how do you divide up the word? How do you decide how it was written? So we spent a lot of our time, particularly with a language called Larry, never really been written down before, and we trained some teams, translation teams, to put these things together.
Now you live in Germany with your wife Sharon and specialise in teaching accelerated language learning techniques. John, would you like to share your website address for people that may be interested in your accelerated language learning techniques?
Yes, thank you, sure. It's www.thelanguagesecret, that's all one word, all small letters, .com. www.thelanguagesecret.com.
Will there be another book about languages, or is this the last we can expect to hear on the subject?
Well, I hope millions of people are going to buy it, and in which case there will be more. The obvious sequel would be How to Speak Languages Well, because this one is called How to Speak Languages Badly.
Yeah.
It's about communication. But hopefully people will catch the bug from this book and they will want to speak languages well. So we're going to do a series on languages we speak, how to speak French well, how to speak German well, etc. And they should be next on our list.
You're already receiving good reviews for The Language Secret, but I want to read this one out as it seems to cover it. A must-read for anyone who wants to learn another language. This is a brilliant book, well written, very informative. The author's passion and understanding of languages shines through. It's packed with good advice and humour and excellent tips and charts for learning a language quickly. Over the years, I've bought many books and CDs to learn the language, but this is the best one I've ever read. Now that's a good review. So
it is a good review. I hope that's not the one my sister wrote. No, it's not. Only joking.
So where can Book Talk Radio Club's listeners purchase The Language Secret?
It's available on Amazon, so that's either amazon.com or if you're in the UK, amazon.co.uk. It's also on Barnes and Noble.
Right.
And if you want the ebook version, you can get that on either of those sites, or also there's a website called Kobo, which gives, I think, a slightly better rate on ebooks.
All right, well, lovely. Thank you, John. That was great. Please come back on Book Talk Radio Club. I'd love to chat and hear more. In the meantime, good luck for the future, and thank you, everyone, for listening to Book Talk Radio Club. Have a great Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thanks, John.
Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed being with you.
My pleasure. Bye now.
Bye.